Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Dentistry Unmasked. I'm David Rice. I'm the chief editor at DentistryIQ with, as always,
Hey everybody, Pam Maragliano-Muniz. David, what is happening?
all great things are happening. And I'm extra excited because, per usual, we have an amazing guest today who
We
I'm hoping we can like flip the script. Most people are reactive. We're hoping to get a little proactive today.
Absolutely. We've been talking for a year about having to get systems in place and, making sure that, ultimately everything's about the patient, but obviously from a staffing standpoint, a practice ownership standpoint, getting off on, you're putting your best foot forward. It all comes down to systems. And so we brought, and I'm so excited because I adore him, Flint Geier. He's the executive VP of Scheduling Institute. Flint, what is up?
Hey, super excited to be here. I appreciate you guys inviting me in, and excited to have this conversation today. To David's point, right? That proactive side and kind of how all the people fit into it, right? Because it's like clinical business, but it's all about the people at the end of the day. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and excited to have this conversation.
Thrilled to have you here. So, what's going on with Scheduling Institute? Anything new happening with you guys?
Well, we're kind of in the middle of working on kind of really focusing heavy into a few of the key areas that we've been working with doctors for. Actually, it'll be 28 years now in September, which is crazy because I grew up alongside the Scheduling Institute, if you will. It'll be 28. I just turned 29, so I like to make the joke that it's like my little brother. I just kind of we got to grow up together. But really excited for all the things that are happening in the industry, right? And so whether it's the consolidation or whether it's the challenge of getting team members right, it's for us, it's that constant challenge of reminding people of just the principles of how to run a practice that really puts the patient first and what that means. And so excited to kind of share a few of those things today with you guys and kind of how actually some of the oldies are still just as good as they have always been.
I love
I
that.
love that too. I think there's a lot of things. We have our practices, we get up every day, we go to work, we do the best that we can. But sometimes the experiences of the patient leave a lasting impression, meaning reviews. So
Mm-hmm.
they can be a practice's shining star, right? Or they could be our dirty little secret that we hope nobody ever encounters, right?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I think I shared this with you the last time we spoke, but I was with a longtime client down actually in the Tampa area, right near you, David. And he's like, we were in Orlando together. He's like, man, the last time I was in Orlando was 10 years ago. And it was actually like right around when he started his practice. And he said, and I remember I got my first 1-star review and it kept me up for days. And I mean, he's like, it almost brought me to tears. And it was just like just wrestling with the challenge of that first negative review, right, 10 years ago. And now he's got hundreds and hundreds of 5-star reviews. But which one sticks in his head, just like I'm sure happens to you guys and happens to really anybody, because we're all people. But it's how do we respond to it, but also how do you make sure that you can avoid it as much as possible?
That's a true story. I mean, I think there are mountains of Facebook groups that dedicate themselves to like, oh, here's another 1-star review. What do we do? And although I like to handle the process on the back end, I would much prefer to minimize the happening on the front end and let those 1-star like reviews that roll in be like the crazy person who never actually came to your practice. So we're
Mm-hmm.
just sort of managing that. But I've got to be honest, I don't ever want a 1-star review from any real patient in my practice. So what do we do, Pam?
Well, we can do our part to minimize it. I don't know if we can ever completely avoid it, but I wanted to do something a little different this
Yeah.
week. And I want to call it WWFD. What would Flint do? Because why, like, could we maybe avoid some of these? And not only can we avoid it, maybe we could handle it properly. I got a 1-star review. I posted a video about it because I was upset. In fact, I remember this must have been years ago, and it was some interview, even Madonna, right? Like Madonna, who's this icon, when she sees negative press about her online, it hurts her feelings. So like if it hurts Madonna, like we can't stand a chance, right? So I got my 1-star review, and I'm going to be honest, I did not fully take the high road on my response. And I think there's probably a better way to handle it. So that's why I wanted to find some reviews online and throw them at Flint and see if he would share with us how we could have avoided this in the first place, but also if it's out there, how do we handle this to make ourselves, leverage ourselves basically from the review that we have. So, Flint, can I just read you a review that I found on Facebook?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. This is a long one, but here it is. I scheduled an appointment to have my teeth cleaned 3 weeks ago in advance and was called Monday to verify my appointment, then Tuesday to verify my appointment, and Wednesday, 2 hours before my cleaning appointment, I was called and told they were canceling appointments for today, and I was one of them. I was also told that they won't have any additional openings for another week. This company has a cancellation fee if I were to cancel on them before my appointment, but must not care about their client's time or money spent. I took off from work and woke up early for this appointment, and this is absolutely terrible business. I do understand how businesses are ran as I own my own company, and this is not the right way to treat a customer. I strongly urge anyone looking for a good dentist to keep looking. These people are not it. If I could give them less than 1-star rating, I truly would. Flint, hook us up
Whoa.
here.
WWFD.
Gosh. This is great, and obviously Mark was having a tough day when he wrote this, but like it's fascinating. And the first thing that jumps out to me here, and so primarily what I focus on and kind of my role and area when we work with doctors and their teams is really that first few touch points. So it's what happens the first time they call, what happens the first time they walk in the office, what is the baseline of the relationship with the patient, how are we communicating, right? And so the first thing that jumps out to me here is I, I hate to make assumptions, but I have to assume that we're using some type of a automated patient communication tool that's just confirming. And the number one thing that I tell people with those, because there are great tools, but when you allow them to be robotic, the relationship becomes robotic. And I can just feel that coming through on this review, right? We never got to build up any good graces. I'm really curious if this was a new patient or an existing patient. I don't know, maybe you guys have a thought on this, but it reads as if this is his first time ever trying to go to this office. But because there's no good grace that exists here, which is why those first interactions, those first impressions are so lasting, right? Confirming with people before, and life happens. If you flip this over to the practice side, could there have been an emergency in the practice in which they truly had to cancel appointments a day out? Absolutely, right? That happens, especially when you've got a one doctor practice and we're all reliant on this person, or a hygienist is out. But it's not necessarily what happens to us, but it's how we handle it, right? I had a coach a long time ago. He's like, perception's reality. And at the time, we kind of shrugged it off because nobody liked him too much. But looking back now, it's like, okay, actually, that's so true, because the perception that this patient has, it's their reality. And so the only way that we can actually improve that is in how we communicate leading up. So I have to imagine it was a relatively quick, cold, let me just hit this patient list of people who we got to reschedule today, and not, I hate to say tact, but a lack of tact in just making sure we are communicating with them. It's like, hey, we apologize. How can we make this right? And then you get into the cancellation fee, right? I think they can be helpful, but to be honest with you, it's this is probably a bad example, but it's like a prenup with a patient. right? It's like you're not really setting yourself up for success. It's like, hey, I know we've never met before, but if you don't show, I'm going to charge you. And some people just take it the wrong way. I think it's great for repeat offenders, but I think when you're trying to foster a new relationship and create something that's really great impression, it can sometimes have an unintended consequence, which is what I imagine we'll see as a theme for all of these is the unintended consequences of some of the blind spots in your patient experience.
It's
It's
really
such a big problem. Oop, go ahead, Pam.
Oh no, I was going to say it's really funny. I'm Italian, so I think of these cancellation fees like the wooden spoon. Like, didn't your mom threaten you with a wooden spoon? And until like you had to really be either really bad or do something enough times to get a swat with the
Mm-hmm.
spoon. And so maybe we shouldn't lead with the wooden spoon. Maybe you get it if you earn it later down the road. But this review in particular, there's a few things that this person says, and then there was something you said I think is really important. He mentioned time. He mentioned he woke up early. He also mentioned money. So I'm trying to read this review and try to understand and just dig a little deeper and see what their value system is. Like, and you said, how do I make this better? And so I think we need to listen to our patients and see what's important to them. Like I'm a present giver. So I feel like if I hurt someone's feelings, if I had to cancel on a patient, if I run late, like you're getting a present, like, cause that's what I want. So, but that might not be what they want, right? Like, so do you have strategies for practices to assess what's important for patients and how we could rectify the situation and get this patient back?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. And we do thousands of in-office on-site team trainings. We have a university um, for specific roles. But when it comes to this specific review, right? It, I mean, it's in that first paragraph. I was called and they were told they were canceling appointments for today, and I was one of them. To me, that reads like I am a number. I am not being treated as anything other, right? And if you have a person who is scheduling an appointment early in the morning, more likely than not, that's typically going to be their preference. Like I'm kind of like this guy. If I'm going to schedule my appointment to go, yeah, I'm always looking for the earliest one because it impedes as little time as possible in my workday, right? Which, to be honest, is the case with most people who, this is a pet peeve of mine, dentists will call their good patients. And the good patients are the ones who show up on time, who pay for their treatment, who go along with the recommendations, and will refer more people just like them. Those people don't have a lot of time. That's like their number one resource. And it's because they're busy. They have lives. They have people who depend on them outside of coming to the office. And I think this guy could be one of them, especially he's talking about owning a business and things of that nature. So number one is if someone specifically requests early and we're going to cancel on them, well, maybe take the 10 extra seconds that it takes you to say, hey, I know you were slotted for an early appointment. We have a couple early slots. Let's say it was 8 a.m. This Thursday, or would you prefer next week, right? So it's not just you're canceled. It's, hey, extenuating circumstances have come up. We'd love to get you in that same slot, right? And so it's how can we do that as many times in these perceived small interactions with a patient that makes them feel like we're paying attention to the things that they care about.
I like that. And I think to your point, like framing the conversation of like, hey, I realize like how busy you must be and how important coming first thing is. So at least a patient feels like they understand where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the circumstances can't be changed and they're not the best, but if that person's a business owner, as they've stated, they understand people get sick, something happens. I was at a business the other day. I was trying to go to dinner and walking in the door, like, we're really sorry. We're not taking any reservations. Like, we just had a flood. Like, okay, well, I could be mad, or I could be like, oh my God, that's awful. There's a million reasons behind the scene. That sometimes I think just framing this scenario helps the patient understand. And then it gets us back to that 1% kooky person who's just going to write a 1-star review no matter what happens, no matter what goes
Oh
wrong,
my
right? 'Cause
gosh,
to your point, Flint, something probably was
absolutely.
going on in their world that day. It was not a great day already.
100%. And sometimes we also just have to kind of give ourselves a pass, right? Like there are plenty of statistics out there. There's a percentage of people who are just a little bit off the rocker, and that's fine. There's nothing that they can do about it. There's nothing we can do about it. And to let yourself get caught up in the exception, right? We talk a lot with our teams about the exception versus the rule. What is our standard, right? And if we're living up to and executing at that standard, which is like a growth focused, patient centric environment team practice, right? Then the things that we can't control, you have to flex the muscle of letting those go, right? Which is, of course, easier said than done.
Yeah, crazy.
So you're going to call this guy, you're going to try to reschedule him, explain, say you're sorry, do all the things. Do you ask him to take the review down? What do we do with this review?
Gosh, you know, I think it's interesting. I personally, in kind of the way that we look at, because we rate team members every single month, right? So like we have a program where we're actually rating team members at the front on how they're handling new patient calls on a 1 to 5 star scale every single month. And what I always tell those team members, because I work with them all the time, it's about 3,000 active front desk team members. And it's like, hey, you're only as good as your last one, but the only one that matters is the next one. So number one, it's flexing the muscle of the only one I need to focus on is that next one. Because if I'm stuck here in this, that's a problem for me. But I do have to understand whatever we did, whatever the process was in place, whatever the system that we were operating on, or the standard we we're allowing to kind of exist in the practice, right? It earned us this. Now, of course, we want to remedy it. And once I remedy it, then I might go ask for the patient to bring the rating down. But the last thing I would want to do, again, this is just me, is start off my remedying conversation, my reach out with, I saw your review and we'd really like you to take that down. So what can we do for you? It's like, well, I don't know. You called me. What are my options? Right. So yes, I think it's fine to ask, but I would fix it first. I would remedy it first and then go back. And once they say like, thank you, or, oh, I really appreciate it. Like, hey, it's our absolute pleasure. And if you wouldn't mind taking down the review, we would really appreciate it. Of course, by no means is it required or necessary, but now that we've remedied the situation, right? That's when I would bring it up. I wouldn't do it first.
Super point and super mindset. Was that a Cornell football thing? You're only as good as your last play, but
No,
that was good.
I'm sure it's something in there. We were not very good, so we were constantly focusing on the next play, just over and over again.
I love it. I love it. All right, can we WWFD the next situation? Here we go. Um, these past few the past few reviews for X Practice made me give them a chance. I'm not sure if the people who have reviews on here are being paid, receive a credit, or are easily influenced, but this dental office is a joke. I gave this dentist center a chance due to my dentist office constantly being booked. And at the last time around, I needed to book 8 months out. So I went to X Practice. This is a high-end dental office that simply wants your money. I've been going to the dentist consistently my whole life outside of COVID. The most I've ever had is a cavity here and there because I take care of my teeth. So I went to X Practice for my first cleaning a couple months ago. They literally took pics and x-rays for 45 minutes. About 2 minutes later, the doctor comes in and says, I need 4 fillings, 2 crowns, and 2 possible root canals. He asked if I had any questions. I said no because I knew it was a lie. After my cleaning, the receptionist immediately comes in and shows me an estimate of a bill. It's over $9,000. And after my insurance pays, I still need to pay over $6,000 out of pocket for dental work. All caps, this person got a little crazy here. That is insane for somebody who takes care of their teeth daily. So what do we do? What would Flint do?
This one's great. There's all kinds of stuff to unpack here, right? Number one is, again, state of the person when it happens. right? So it's, you kind of have to, and this is the hardest part. Like if this was actually a review of your practice, right? Then it's okay, I got to take the emotion out. Let's actually find what the issues are here, right? Number one, you have, this is a high-end dental office that simply wants your money. Okay. I would assume that comes from, they walk in, they've done a nice job of like creating a comfortable, pleasant, good-looking environment, which are all super positive things. However, there's something called positive intelligence, and they do a saboteur assessment, and I think there's like 10 different ones. But there's one that everyone shares, and it's the judge. And everyone is constantly judging you, and they're assuming how you're judging them. And that's just like the cycle of being a human that's alive, right? So the challenge, and we deal with this a lot, is when you actually put in the work and do the things to create more appealing, comfortable, nice looking offices, you're also going to have to deal with the fact that some people are going to judge that, and they're going to actually see things that you've done for the betterment of the patient as a negative, because in their mind it's like, oh wow, they must be overcharging people, they must be overdiagnosing people. And that's the arena where we don't get into, we don't mess around, we do not play in the arena of what should you diagnose or how to diagnose or whatever clinical side, right? We tell all of our clients, like, hey, we're going to teach you the things that allow you to grow the practice, be patient centric, and apply some systems and processes that kind of make that a little bit easier. But we have to have a deal, is that you're going to be an ethical practitioner. Like that's the one caveat of everything that we do. And so I would also, sorry, I would imagine you guys see this a lot, and I'll let you kind of speak to the clinical side of things, but how often do patients actually go to a doctor for years who's been underdiagnosed? And what is the shock that occurs when they go to a doctor who now is actually going to put everything on the table, because they're not afraid to diagnose the things that are there and let the patient choose, right? So that's another thing that I'm seeing, which is really hard because this office actually has no control over previous diagnosis. And then there's all kinds of tactical things that are off here, right? So doctor leaving, then the receptionist coming in and just showing them the bill, right? No handoff, no personal touch. You can tell that this woman was not put through an experience that matched up with what I have to assume the physical space looks like. And that's just kind of reading between the lines here. Just because you have a pretty office doesn't mean that you have a high-end office, right? And just because you have a great patient experience doesn't mean you have a great office either, right? It's that balance of both. And clearly in this situation, there are things missing kind of all throughout that has to do with some really small tweaks, that then turns into this person getting very upset.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely a lack of creating value here
Mm-hmm.
in this appointment. And I tell you, I feel like you got to feel the patient out starting the second they walk in and the second you meet them. And I also, I come in at the end of the appointment. It's rare if I kind of come in right after the hygienist sort of like does her data collection. And so I think it's important to ask the patient, what brings you here? Like what
Mm-hmm.
prompted you to come to this practice? And are there specific concerns you'd like addressed today? And so I think if you start with their chief complaint, get a sense of what they're about. If they're just here for a dentist, hasn't been in a year, no problems, you can't slam them with a treatment plan for 8 crowns. Then there's patients that come in and they say, hey, I heard you're the best. I want my teeth, my smile fixed. And I'll say, well, tell me what that means to you, because you getting your quote unquote smile fixed might be just whitening versus somebody who
Right.
needs 12 veneers. I mean, it's a different story. But I think that's an important part of this conversation. And I even tell patients as I'm reviewing their radiographs, I review them with them. I review their photos with them. And I tell them, look, you're going to hear us say a lot of things today. And there's many things that I can live with that deviate from perfect, but I want to note them so that I can monitor them. And if something changes between now and a subsequent visit, then we might have to be compelled to make a recommendation to replace this restoration or fix this tooth or something like that. So at this point, I'm just throwing little bugs in the ear of the patient that there's some things that have heightened my interest, but not necessarily I'm trying to slam them with a huge treatment plan. I think it's job security, really, because these patients will stay with you and eventually you'll get your
Mm-hmm.
8 crowns. It might not be in one sitting, but it's going to happen once you create that value. David, you had a practice way longer than mine. I'm only 10 years in with mine. What did you do?
Yeah. First of all, that's such gold, Pam. I hope everybody who's listening goes back and rewinds and re-listens to that. We add a couple questions, during that patient interview. One and really two are like so simple. Like, what did you love about your last practice or one before us? So we can learn like the things we should do. And then, hey, were there things you didn't like about that? So hopefully we don't make those same mistakes. And a lot of times when I'm like picturing this patient here, to your point, Flint, a very likely scenario is they went to somebody for, their whole lifetime who sort of looked in there, everything was sort of okay, and they were just great friends and they loved all their patients in kumbaya, which means whoever the unlucky dentist is next is probably going to have some
Mm-hmm.
things to diagnose. So when a patient says, boy, I loved going there and everything was great all the time, and what I didn't like is when somebody came and told me I needed things, it became easy for us to say, okay, so Pam, when we do see things, permission to just talk out loud about what concerns us? How would you like us to handle that? And then you get to choose. You're the patient. You can say yes to all of it, some of it, or none of it. Like those are all equally great options here. No one's here to judge you. Our job's just to give you great advice. What helps you most?
I
So
think
Yeah.
that's
No.
incredible. Always ask permission. What works for you? How does this, can I tell you this? Can I show you this? Would you do this at home? I think if you have that
yeah,
dialogue with a patient, it's going to be super valuable.
so helpful.
Yeah,
So
and I have
helpful.
to imagine it allows you to live in reality with the patient too, right? I love the last thing you said. Will you do this at home? Right? It's because I mean, to be honest, I was probably one of those kids. Luckily, I didn't have to really do anything that required a lot of at-home maintenance outside of
Yeah.
the blocking and tackling or the brushing and flossing. Um, but getting to understand, right? Going back to the last review, I think it echoes with this. They most likely didn't take the time, which actually doesn't take that much time at all if you do it right, to understand what's important to this woman and why she potentially wouldn't move forward. Because reading through this, the number one obstacle I think this person would have, and again, I haven't done the interview, it sure seems as if it's budget because of the response, right? Now it's either budget, time, trust, or pain, right? It's like those are the four reasons people won't do it. The four reasons they won't move forward. And there's four reasons that they really care about the stuff, right? It's they want it to last a long time. They want it to look good. They want it to ultimately be as painless as possible and taking some time to understand what is important to them, what is going to potentially prevent them from doing the things that are going to get them as healthy as possible. And then to what you guys have been saying, give them the choice. Don't say you have to do this. If it's really bad and it's going to get worse, yeah, you have to say that it's going to get worse, but it's still their choice.
Couldn't agree more. And that's a bummer because I feel like this patient in particular is outcomes oriented. I take care of my teeth, and therefore she
Mm-hmm.
was expecting a good report card. And so I
Yeah.
feel like when you have a patient like that, that's a great patient because that's somebody you should be seeing every 3 months for hygiene, and they should be doing all of their things at home. That's the patient that listens to your recommendations because they don't want 2 root canals. They don't want a treatment plan for $9,000. So, all right, this was a good one. All right, I have one more for you, Flint. You ready for it?
Let's do it.
Okay. You can improve by hiring receptionists and office staff that know how to speak to customers with respect and etiquette. When somebody says to me, that's not what I asked you in regard to an insurance question with an attitude in her voice, I'm not very appreciative of that. I found it so disrespectful. I spoke to the doctor about his staff once before. Obviously, it hasn't changed. So very disappointed.
So very disappointed. Gosh, the tone of the review is great. This one's great, right? And when you talk about things that the dentist, the practice owner, most likely has no idea about what's going on. Again, last review, dentists kind of, they were a part of it, right? First one, pretty much blind to the doctor. And then this one is the same thing. And they're just providing recommendations. And to your point that you made earlier, right? Reading these with eyes towards what can we improve? Where are the opportunities? That's where I would challenge this person is. This is a gold mine sitting in this office today that if you just make a few changes can be actually super positive, right? But okay, speaking with respect and etiquette, when someone says to me, that's not what I asked you, we actually have a rule that we have internally, and we teach the offices that we work with. Like the worst thing you can tell somebody, specifically a patient, I don't know, or that's not my job, or department, or whatever it is, right? It's like there's the most dismissive, like, I don't know. That's not my job, all right? I don't have to know that. Go ask someone else, which no one will ever actually say. But that's how it comes across, right? Like this person saying, that's not what I asked you. All she or he said is, that's not what I asked you. But the way the patient actually hears that is, that's not what I asked you. What's wrong with you, you idiot? Right? Like we add those additional words in our mind. That's that saboteur of the judge, right? And I love that it's an insurance question because we're most likely actually putting up an insurance barrier in front of this patient who may not have even brought it up themselves because the team member is actually very insurance driven and is putting that onto the patients that call into practice, which we see happen all the time. And it's not just insurance, it's price, it's insurance, it's time, it's all the things that a patient may find issue with or may be an obstacle to them coming in, that whoever is talking to the patient also has kind of inside their mind and how they act. If we're not careful and we don't actually get very proactive with in the system and the training and the standard that we uphold, right, it actually seeps in to the patient. And so that's what I'm reading here. I'm reading a high stress environment. I'm reading a busy office that doesn't have a lot of systemization. And I'm reading somebody who is treating this call as more of an interruption to their day than an opportunity to serve another patient. And those are actually huge problems that are way beyond this review because this person ultimately is right. And if it's a new patient, well, it's 2024. I'm going to pop this right out, get my phone. I'm going to go to the next one on Google, and I'm going to find somebody else because it's easier than ever. So I think it's great. I think it's true. And at the end of the day, super avoidable, especially if this person's already talked to the doctor about it.
This one's
Develop
challenging.
your team.
Yeah, but I also feel like this puts the doctor like between like a rock and a hard place. Like there's a staffing challenge right now. Obviously, I can't be like, you know what, you're right, you're out of here. I can get 10 of you tomorrow, like to the left, to the left. No, we don't have that opportunity right now. So I think that I can see the perspective of the patient, but you're right. I think that anytime I think like all of this starts with a vision and a mission, right? Like if you tell your team what your practice is about and they understand like the standards upon which your practice is built, the way that this person treated this patient, I would imagine, does not uphold the standard of the practice. And that comes down to the owner. So I think, I mean, one thing I learned today, Flint, is that if you I'm one of those that if I do something like buy something, I start with just like the number stars on a review. I think when you read a review, there's a lot of like little nuances that can tell you a lot more than just the words in the review. And
Oh
so
my
I think
gosh.
today I feel like I'm
Yes.
going to be, a little bit, I'm going to be reading reviews with like just a little bit more intention moving forward because you can just, feel some of these reviews and what it's coming from. And you can almost imagine what the office looks like. You can imagine what that day was like. You can imagine almost what that person looks like. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's really
Mhm.
profound.
And I think you should do that about the good ones too, because if we're being totally honest, there are some crazy bad ones and there are some questionable good ones, right? So, and that's why I think putting too much weight into this in general, I think people are actually starting to get smart to it and realize that just because someone has good reviews does not mean everything. Like, I think you should make your own choices, you should make your own decisions and your own judgments, because there's plenty of people out there who can get a bunch of good reviews and have found a way to hide the good ones. And then there's a bunch of people out there that have bad ones that are, to your point, a patient that never came in. So I think that's a great piece of advice, is just to actually read them and read into them if you're going to read them at all.
I think it's easy for us as dental practices to check out these Facebook groups or whatever and read the reviews and kind of, you're like, sucks to be you, glad that didn't happen to me, and we can sort of live in our ivory tower of positive reviews if we're fortunate enough to be in that position. But that we still need to be looking at our own practices with a discerning eye. And Flint, you have a really cool audit for practices to kind of randomly assess what their patient experiences are like. Would you share that with us?
Yeah. So, and thank you for bringing that up. I think all of these, uh, all of these reviews, and really at the end of the day, it's not about the reviews. It's about what is the experience that a patient truly gets when they come into your practice, right? And so, for I guess almost 28 years now, the foundation of what we do when we work with offices is we go in and we uncover blind spots in the patient experience that are opportunities ultimately to improve the experience the patient receives, which minimizes the inattention, which is ultimately why people leave, right? They don't leave because usually you do something bad. They usually leave because of an inattention that you have towards them in some area of the practice that you're just not paying attention to because you're busy and you're doing something else. And so we call it the blind spot analysis. And I mentioned it earlier. We actively do this to hundreds of practices across the country, and it's analyzing what is that first impression. If a new patient wants to come to your practice and they want to become a new patient, right? How are we executing there? What is the standard of effectiveness and kind of great attitude, tone level, all those things that create a good first impression? And we call it the blind spot analysis. So we rate teams on a 1 to 5 star scale, and it is in no way, shape, or form to be used as a disciplinary tool, right? So the number one thing I say when I put this in front of someone is, if you if you take the assessment, if you have us do the practice blind spot for you, and then you just want to use that as a disciplinary tool on the team, right? Please just don't do it, because that's not what it's for. Because the score that is revealed has nothing to do with the team member that answers the phone, or the person that has that first experience. It is everything about the system and the opportunity inside the practice to adjust those things. So if you're someone who's curious about whether or not there's potentially 5, 10, 20 more new patients a month that could be coming in that aren't, just because of some things that we're unaware of, as these reviews show, I invite you to take that assessment. I think it's practiceblindspot.com. I think you guys may have it in the show notes, but would love to just provide that for you guys, free of charge, just for you to be able to get the information, see what's going on in your practice. And then just like we'd say for the patient, you can do with that what you will. We're happy to help, but otherwise you'll just know and you can do with it what you wish.
That's amazing. All right. So we will make sure that's in the show notes, everybody. So practiceblindspots.com. That's such a great way to just keep getting better tomorrow and the day after and the day after and the day after. So Flint, this has been incredible. I loved what you said, Pam, about the nuances in the reviews. It's totally shifted my mindset on how to assess those and, look at my own reviews, offer advice to people who ask for that help. So this has been amazing. Flint, thank you for being here. Pam, like, how do we, I don't know. I feel like my watch is broken on these episodes.
I know. I wish we could do that. Flynn, can we do this again? Because I loved kind of dissecting these reviews. And I think that we can take a negative and turn it into a positive. And if, in some cases, learn and grow from it, if you look within and realize there is an inherent problem in your practice. But I think that these tell a really, really great story. And I appreciate you for helping us kind of look deeper than just the words that are on the Google review.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I appreciate you guys having me on. Would be happy to do it again.
Wonderful. So, okay, you heard it here. You'll see Flint again, and we will see you next week for Dentistry Unmasked. I'm Pamela Maragliano-Muniz with David Rice. See you next week. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening to the show this week. And thanks to our guests and sponsors on this episode.
Please check out our social media at Dr. Pamela_Maragliano and at Dental Economics Official.
Or you can check me out at Ignite DDS or at Dr. David Rice.
And go to dentaleconomics.com to receive dental economics. You can choose to receive DE in print or digitally, and you can also get the details of our Principles of Practice Management conference on our website.
If you have topics or guests or anything you'd like to talk about on the show, send us an email to dentistryunmaskedpodcast@gmail.com, and we will do our very best to make it happen. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.